Dysemic Dad here. Continuing along the lines of talking about the end of the relationship with a narcissist, I wanted to go over kind of a strange, issue with that, and that is just kind of I guess almost like a continuation of the fog, and also a specific type of grief um, that is very common at after the end of a relationship with a narcissist. Um, and so just diving in head first, the the issue with the relationship with a narcissist and the grief at the end, um, it's complicated. There's a lot of things going on. One is at, as the fog clears and you start gaining clarity of what actually happened in the relationship, or what was happening, and who this person really was. um, it's confusing, because you you're sad because you have all these feelings from when you were in the relationship and from when you thought this person was Mrs. Wonderful. And now that you've kind of seen the mask fall off and seen them for who they are, and that the puzzle pieces are starting to fit, it's confusing because you're it's like you're sad, but you're like, at the same part of your mind is saying, sad about who? Like that person that you're grieving over didn't exist in reality. It was an illusion. It was the mask. And so it makes grieving the end of the relationship um, confusing from that aspect. Another one, and this is one that's kind of just embarrassing, but I think I speak for many abuse survivors. I've known some in my life, and it's been very difficult to be on the outside of their relationships. I had a very close ex-girlfriend, decades ago, and she was in a really bad relationship. And we would go to her, she would, leave because things got so terrible. And we would, me and her friends would rush in and be like, hey, look, you got to get out. You got to get out. You cannot go back. And very quickly, she would like almost go into this like trance and say, no, I love him. Things are good. And then she'd start making excuses and go right back in. And at the time, I never understood that. And now, out of this most recent, relationship with a narcissist, sadly, I do understand it now. It's called trauma bonding, and it's really cruel and sad. Basically, if I can go into some psychology here, if you, say you're teaching a dog and you smack them on the nose, or you say, come here, and you smack them on the nose. Okay. If you do that 100% of the time, and you say, come here, they're going to learn to stay away. And if you say, come here, and you give them a doggy treat, they will, come to you. And oddly enough, like 80% of the time. And the reason I say 80% of the time is that 20% of the time, they, they're going to be, playing, with the neighbor's cat or chasing a bird or something like that. Like they're like, I don't want a treat right now. They are assured and confident in the treat being there. Now, if you have that dog and half the time you say, come here, dog, half the time you smack it, half the time you give them the treat, that does a weird thing to the brain where it almost like builds like an addiction. Like it actually wires the brain that way, because they then with the treat, they connect a sense of rarity or scarcity with it. And so it becomes more, like, oh, a treat, that's a big deal. I don't always get a treat. And so when I do, it's a big deal. And when their owner says, come here, dog, they don't know what they're going to get. They could get smacked in the nose. That happens half the time. Even though they get smacked in the nose half the time, they're still running to get that treat more, quickly than the dog who gets a treat 100% of the time. Sadly, humans are the same way. And what happens in relationships with narcissists is that after the initial honeymoon love bombing phase is over with, the narcissist will slowly start going into building the trauma bond. And the way they do that is by, distancing themselves, and then doing a, quick burst of love bombing. Oh, you're my dream come true. We're star-crossed lovers. We're soulmates. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. And then get them back. And then once they're back, just act like they don't exist. Again, just kind of build that distance, or in bad cases, maybe get verbally or emotionally abusive, or, I don't know what the correct term is, but, abuse through neglect. Just act like that person doesn't exist. What they want doesn't matter. And then after a couple days, bring them, reel them back in. So through this roller coaster of distance, abuse, neglect, and then love bombing, it wires the victim's brain to just basically be obsessed with this, person. So they think of their narcissistic abuser as their soulmate, as their dream, that's come to life. And they'll rationalize everything that's happening. So if the narcissist is using excuses, sorry. And narcissists say, oh, I've been so busy lately with work. Or, I've been, sick with a cold, so I had to not talk to you for a week. Or, just, pick your excuse. The victim will be like, oh, okay, that's why. And let them get away with it. In my case, I let them get away with it for a couple days, couple weeks, couple months, couple years, and it just piled and piled and piled, and the time between the love bombing grew greater and greater and greater. And so you would think that things would be easier for me. Thankfully, it was, what a weird statement. It was bad enough that I could get out. It was bad enough that I was motivated to leave the relationship. Because I was like, this relationship is garbage. This isn't doing anything for me. Smell you later. So I was able to get out, but at the same time, it's like, ouch. It's like, I'm dealing with some of that trauma bond where I will have these overwhelming feelings for my ex-girlfriend. And then, another part of my mind screams, okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? And has to remind me of all the horrible, terrible things that she did. And so I have these like weird conflicting parts of me that I'm just at this point just kind of compartmentalizing. I don't know how I'm supposed to deal with it, but that's how I'm dealing with it right now. And so that part's been confusing. Another part of coming out of the relationship with a narcissist that's confusing is again, you are left wondering, once the mask comes off, you're still left wondering, like, okay, I'm confused. This person I was in love with and who I was in a relationship with, who I would do anything in the world for, never existed. It was an illusion. It was a mask. And then after the relationship ends, you're like just left like, okay, what do I do with that? The another part that's very confusing about coming out of the end of the relationship with a narcissist is that, as I had said earlier, the flip side of kind of rationalizing and giving into their excuses, for everything under the sun, is I haven't touched on it yet, but future faking. So future faking is, again, it's a tool in the toolbox of the narcissist to control and manipulate. And so what the narcissist will do is, when things are not great in the relationship, they will shift focus to this imaginary future. And they'll say, oh, what about our wedding? What about our honeymoon? What about if we, go on this trip? Or what about if we, get this house and how we're going to decorate it? And, wrap you up in this kind of, wonderful, perfect relationship that's out in the future. And so while things are not working out in, reality in day-to-day in the relationship, you're just completely focused on this future, which actually isn't going to happen. I mean, like I've said before with like the with a narcissist, of like, okay, why did they do this when they said they were going to do this other thing? Because they wanted to. Narcissists lie because they're narcissist. Water's wet, fire's hot. It's the way it is. And it's the same with future faking. It's like, why did the narcissist talk about, the wedding, the honeymoon, decorating the house and stuff? They didn't have any intention of doing that. They were never going to marry you. They were never going to go on a honeymoon. They were never going to get a house with you. That was just a tool in the toolbox. It was a convenient way to control you at that time and shift your focus from how awful things are, at that time, to this imaginary future. And so another part of, kind of, grieving the end of the relationship with the narcissist is that all those, hopes and dreams that you believed, that you had, that you may have chimed in and helped build, and said, yeah, this is where I want to, have our wedding, have our honeymoon, where I want us to live, where, I want us to go, in the future, where, we will retire, and, all those, hopes, dreams, and stuff for the future, they're they're gone, and it hurts. One, because it was a lie. It was just a simple tool to manipulate you, and and two, it's not going to happen, and so you're grieving over the relationship, which is over, and then you're grieving over this future that you wanted to have, and that's over. So add yet another, couple of layers to the grieving process, and then you have, kind of tying, all those together, just kind of grieving again, like, what could have been. Again, going back to, the mask, before you realize that the mask is off, or before the mask starts to slip off, especially if you're in that honeymoon and love bombing phase, it's wonderful. It's heaven. It's, I know for me, I'd say, like, this is the best, and I said this is the healthiest relationship I've ever been in. It's great. We don't argue. Everything just happens naturally. We're both in sync. We both enjoy the same things, and we're both, open to learning about each other and stuff. And so you think, like, what if that had continued? What if that person who you initially met and fell in love with, what if they stayed that person? What would that relationship have looked like if they had lived up to their commitments, if they had, not broken their promises, if their actions and words had remained in alignment, if they were on the same page as you in the relationship? Like, what would that relationship have looked like? And then project that into the future. It's like, what would that relationship have looked like if it had continued? And so you're grieving both, what that relationship could have looked like if the person, if the mask was actually the person, and then also what would that look like in the future if that was actually the actual person. And so you're grieving, what is that now, 6 different layers of kind of different perspectives and angles that in a normal relationship you probably don't have. You're like, oh, I miss this person, but it didn't work out. Okay, the end, and then you go on. Um, and again, what can, like I spoke in earlier videos, make this more complicated. It doesn't add necessarily another layer of grief, but it just makes things more complicated. And that's that you could be going through all this during the smear campaign. So the same time you're grieving what was, what could have been, um, you know, the illusion, of the mask versus the real person, the future that you had planned for. While you're grieving all these things, the narcissist is out to get you and basically doing all they can to assassinate your character, ruin your life, um, to the degree that they can, and focusing all their energy into that. And again, it's bewildering because you're like, okay, wait a minute, this narcissist, especially at the time that they had the mask on, was the perfect partner for me. They were so amazing in every, just if you have like your list of what you want in a partner, and you're just checking off all the boxes. They're everything, the full package. And now they're out to get you. Now they're like, every single one of those checked boxes is empty. You're like, okay, this person's horrible. And again, it's confusing because you're trying to put the relationship in the past, go through the grieving process, learn, what you can along the way, heal, and move on. And unfortunately, while you're trying to do that, they're still, trying to get you. Thankfully, I have not experienced any hoovering, which is another narcissistic term that basically means that they will, especially after a relationship has ended, they'll reach out and say, oh yeah, I know it's been a month, but I think I left one of my books over at your place. So could you check to see if that book is still there? I really like that book. Or hey, if you're gonna be by on Saturday, can I come by and I just want to pick up that book. Or they'll reach out and just say, hey, I know it's been 2 months, but how did you do on your grades for that exam? Did you pass it okay? I was just thinking about you. Okay, bye. And then just go back to radio silence. Again, I don't know why it's some narcissistic game. Even after the end of the relationship, they still have their little games that they want to play. So I have not had to deal with that yet. I am, hopefully, knock on wood, I won't have to. So hopefully this video has helped you out, and I'll continue to touch on other behaviors and traits and aspects.